Hello and welcome to the inaugural episode of Pushing 40-Bit Gaming. My name is Clipper and I'm here with my good friend Cynic and Frosty.
Hi.
And what we want to explain a little bit about what this podcast is and what we're going to do. We found a need with, I don't know, we've all accumulated these giant backlogs of single player games, right? Every time there's a Steam sale, every time there's a GOG sale, we buy more and more. And we found ourselves deciding, well, what do we want to play next? How do we want to get through our backlog and whatnot? And as we searched the web and looked for some other things, we never really found a good, should I play this or should I not play this, like, consensus, right? You go back and look at the old Metacritics or you go look at the old reviews and whatnot, and they give you a number score and all that. But what we want to do is say, if you've got this game in your backlog, or maybe this is a game you'd like to add to your backlog, is it worth playing or not? And that's kind of what we want to answer with this podcast. So what it is we focus on single-player games, and we're going to play through them like a book club.
And there was kind of some things like that out there, but mostly focused on console stuff. And we are mainly nowadays PC players, PC gamers. So we kind of wanted to fill that hole if there was one. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, again, I've played some from my collection that had low Metacritic scores that I loved. I've played some that had high Metacritic scores that I didn't like so much just because they weren't meant for me. And so we're going to focus on who this is for, what type of gamer is going to want to play each game.
Yeah.
Right. And going with the book club theme, we'll always have a nice centerpiece here for you all to enjoy. There won't be treats, unfortunately.
Oh.
Not really that it'd help anyone out viewing the internet, but we're going to encourage our viewers to play with us. Go ahead and get the game, go through it at the same time, and then we'll decide whether it was worth our time or not.
Yeah. So we'll try to schedule in advance so you have time to get the game, play the game. We'll watch for sales on GOG or on Steam in case you want to pick up some of these older games. Or some of the newer games. We'll play newer ones as well, as long as they're single-player focused. But yeah, I mean, let us know how we're doing. Let us know what games you want us to play. We want your feedback and involvement, and we want you to join us in playing these games.
And probably the most important thing for everyone to know is kind of our backgrounds in gaming and kind of what our preferences is, what our favorite genres are. So kind of as we give our review and kind of how we thought the game was, you'll try to we'll want you to kind of identify with one of us and say, yeah, I kind of generally find myself in line with him and his opinion is not. So to start that off, Rob, kind of what's your jam?
Yeah, so I mean, I grew up without having a PC in the house for a long time. I had an NES eventually because my parents decided it was cheaper to get an NES than to pay for the damage I was doing running across rooftops in LA when I accidentally fell through a rooftop and landed on a Harley Davidson and knocked it over. So yeah, lesson there for you. If you want a console, all you have to do is something horrible and your parents will get you one.
We do not condone.
Yeah. But, so that was definitely platformers were basically all we had for the Nintendo. I'd trade games with other kids. Eventually transitioned into PC gaming kind of in my tween years, I guess. And I really like, genre-wise, I would say the first-person or third-person shooters, but mixed with puzzle elements. So, Half-Life, Tomb Raider, Montezuma's Return, if you remember that one. So any of those sorts of games, I really enjoy not only the action, but mixed with some sort of brain teaser.
Cool. Where'd your handle come from?
It's kind of a random thing. I just had a conversation one day about how like placebos could work for some people, but not for the cynical people. And then like the very next day, for some reason, I needed to spin up a second Steam account so that my wife and I could play together. And I was like, oh, I need a new handle. And so I just threw that one in there and it stuck and kind of became my main Steam account after that.
Cool.
So what's your shtick? What's your jam?
What's my jam?
Yeah, what's your jam?
My name's Frosty. People have been calling me that since junior high. I don't. Clipper and I have been friends since junior high.
Right.
Cynic, we kind of met.
You're going to see names interchanged
Rob,
back.
Cynic, it's the same.
We met in our 20s.
Yeah.
But it's been over a decade, I guess, that we've been friends.
Man, we're old.
I know, right?
All right.
Well, hence the name of the podcast.
Yeah.
Like pushing 40. We're not quite 40.
Give ourselves a few buffer years there, but...
Yeah.
Right.
That's true. We didn't explain where our name came from. So kind of combining that we're almost 40. We're older guys that play games, and we're making a joke about 8-bit and 64-bit and all that stuff that consoles used to do. Anyway, I don't remember exactly where the Frosty thing started. It was either me playing... kid in my neighborhood had an actual LAN, had multiple computers in his house, which was unheard of in the mid-90s.
90s, wow.
And so we'd go over there and play Warcraft 2, and you had to input your player name, and for some reason I chose Frosty. I don't know if that started first or Also, in junior high, I was drawing pictures of snowmen. One of our friends, Han, he was in the art class with me, and I think he might have started calling me Frosty too. So again, one of those two things, I'm not really sure exactly which happened first, like a chicken or egg situation. But the Frosty thing stuck. Everyone, by the time high school came around, everyone was calling me Frosty. To this day, you guys call me that, and no one calls me my real name. So
There was a solid decade where we didn't even know his first name.
Yeah, me meeting you much later, it literally was like 5-6 years before I found out that your name wasn't actually Frosty. I mean, I assumed, but I didn't know.
yeah. So like amongst gaming people, that's what I go by. I don't tell people at work that that's my name or anything. I go by my real name.
It's not on your luggage?
No, it's
Oh,
not on
fair
my
enough.
luggage. Gaming wise, I kind of like Cynic. I like the first person shooters, lots of puzzle stuff, adventure games, anything with a really good story that like balances story with action. I seem to prefer those kinds of things. But then there's the left field kind of stuff. We play a lot of Rocket League together lately, which doesn't really match up with maybe what you would think our interests were, but we like that a lot.
Yeah, Rocket League has really become the kind of poker night of our generation. I mean, you sit down, you hop on Discord, you just kind of talk about stuff, whatever's going on. The Rocket League is average at best, but it's there. Something just... I don't know. We could, I guess, just call each other on the phone, but I don't know.
Nah.
You have to have an excuse to hang out these days, right? I mean, nobody uses phone, we'll text, but then, Discord's where you actually talk. Even though we all have mobile communication device capable of voice transmitting in our pockets at all times, no, only Discord.
Yeah, exactly.
Isn't it funny how Discord's kind of come of age, like in the last year or two? I mean, it's a new thing. Before, how many different platforms did we have to talk on?
Yeah.
Like, there was always the Skype group that always do, like, these Skype calls, and that always
Skype.
felt so businessy to me, like, and the open mic thing. And a lot of people with kids, especially, like, had trouble with open mics because you had kids screaming and whatnot.
Yeah.
Me, I've got a pretty quiet house, so it wasn't a big deal to have an open mic, but the whole push-to-talk, I mean, there was, what was before? What was the one before?
Ventrilo?
Ventrilo,
Yeah.
there's TeamSpeak.
Or just stuff if a game had it built in.
Which was always so hit or miss, right? I mean,
Well, Steam Chat still is, right? I mean, yeah.
Very true.
Yeah, but whereas Discord definitely has filled that niche good enough. It's not perfect, but good enough.
Clipper, explain thyself.
So I go by Clipper. I've been doing that since as long as I can remember. Since we've had a
You were born?
No, I was born with the name. No, mine came directly from. I'm a big fan of simulations. Flight sims, racing simulators, stuff like that. And I couldn't remember if it was Falcon 3.0 or there was one called F-15 Strike Eagle from Microprose. If you remember those guys.
I remember the name, yeah.
One of the main characters, one of the pilots, was Clipper, spelled with a C. And when I went to sign up for my first email account, Juno, if anyone remembers Juno, Clipper was always taken with a C, so I changed to a K. Now Clipper with a K is taken all the time anyway, but so there's always something random added to the end, which, funny enough, I feel bad for future generations who are going to try to get names on things and email addresses, because they're going to have like their regular name or their tag, and then like 30 numbers after it, right?
Yeah.
Or they just have to combine two arcane words like cynic and placebo.
Yeah.
Do you ever find that taken?
No one has ever taken that name. I mean, maybe if people start watching this, somebody will go like hijack it onto these things just to screw with me.
One thing led to another, and cynic placebo 379824.
Oh, sad.
But my background in gaming, I've been a PC gamer since the beginning. My folks were always very anti-console. They saw them as a waste of time, as just a simple, we're not buying you another toy type thing, right? But my dad always saw the importance of having a computer in the house. He saw computers as being the future and kind of what the life skills we'd need. So we'd always have a computer in the home. So my gaming has been exclusively PC, or even before PC, Atari, since I've started. In my adulthood, I actually bought a Nintendo Wii U, which was the first console I ever owned, which is kind of funny.
That's crazy.
The first console I buy is a complete flop. But yeah, I've always been PC gaming. And like I said, I was the Atari family. There was always the Atari guys, the Commodore guys, Amiga, the Apple II guys, And for me, it was an Atari 800, which actually had PC elements of, you had basic programming, you had a very rudimentary word processor or whatnot, but it could take the same consoles, the 2600, had the same controllers as the 2600 and all that. So that's kind of where I got my start.
Cool.
So you were on platform NES.
Yeah,
From the beginning.
my dad had now I forgot the name, Sega Master System.
Yeah.
I think is what it's called. So it's before the Genesis.
where
Came out.
every box art came on like grid paper for some reason, like graphing
Probably
paper.
so. I can't even remember that. Anyway, so that was probably since I was born or super young. So we were console gaming since before I can remember. And so siblings growing up, that was something we always did. I'm the oldest in my family with 4 kids, and so Super Nintendo, we were always playing games together. Nintendo 64 was great because you could actually play 4 people, and there were 4 of us, and so that led to a lot of fun times, fun memories. And then about those, N64 days, became friends with you, and you guys were all into PC gaming, kind of won me over, turned me to the dark side.
The expensive side.
Yes. But I did kind of gravitate towards that and kind of preferred that. Just kind of offers more freedom, things like that. But I do still console game. I don't have anything against it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I still do a lot of retro console gaming too. I mean, I own basically every Nintendo up to the Wii, and then I don't own anything after it. I have all the retro stuff. Then I have an Xbox and Xbox 360. So I'm not a new console gamer, but at least the old stuff I have a lot of, and I enjoy it still. It's great.
Awesome.
So what kind of had you gravitate toward consoles? Because you mentioned your folks bought you an NES. Why an NES?
I mean, let's see. So I would have been probably 7 when we got that. So that would have been almost 1990. It would have been like on the cusp of 1990. And so that was just the system that existed everywhere, the one they could get. They got their hands on one, maybe even secondhand, I don't know. And so that's just the one we had. And then tons of kids in the neighborhood had Nintendos. And so we would trade cartridges back and forth, right? So even though we only owned 4 cartridges in my family, I was able to trade one that was not a very good game, Cybernoid, if any of you ever played it, but it was not common. And so I could trade that with everybody, and they'd have it for like a week because it's impossible to beat. And so I could borrow whatever game they had and play that for like a full week before they wanted it back.
That's great.
Yeah.
I remember I was always a PC gamer, and my friends all had NESs, right? So I was like the eternal Luigi, right? They were always Mario, and I was always the sidekick. And I mean, I was just happy to be able to play on a console because the Atari games were pretty limited in scope of what they had. You had your classics, Missile Command, Centipede, stuff like that. But then Mario Brothers came along, and I remember. So by the time the NES started getting around, I'd moved on to what was called an Atari 1040. It was kind of the last real Atari computer you got. It featured IBM emulation mode, which was kind of fantastic. But I remember my friends all had Mario Brothers, and I said, "Dad, I want Mario Brothers." And he's like, "There is no Mario Brothers for the Atari." And then he came home randomly with this disc he got from Babbage's Software that said The Great Guiana Sisters. And I'm like, what on earth is this?
I thought that was just a modern thing.
Which is funny because the original was a complete like 1-to-1 ripoff of Mario Brothers.
Huh.
But you were 2 sisters, and instead of getting a mushroom, you got like a little target-looking thing. Same like rules applied. You could break blocks when you have the mushroom, whatnot. And I played it for hours, and people would say, "Oh, do you have Mario Brothers?" I'm like, "Yeah, kinda, I got something." And fun, like you mentioned before, it's now a remake. They've made the Great Guiana Sisters again, Twisted Dreams, and I can't remember what the expansion's called, but
Yeah, I own them, but I don't remember right now.
you're gonna get that theme is gonna go along. Oh yeah, I own that one, but I haven't played it yet.
Yes.
Hence why we're here, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And for any Italian viewers out there, we apologize that he's pronouncing it Guyana instead of Gianna.
I don't know. It was written on a 3.5 floppy randomly.
So ignorant of you.
And I know, right?
Now I want to come out with like French Guyana sisters or something.
We're better.
Geography jokes.
We're better at PC gaming and console gaming than speaking our
Linguistics.
own language.
That sounds about right.
So right now, what do you game on now? Are you all PC?
I mean, not 100%. I do retro consoles, but again, I don't own any modern PlayStation or Xbox. It's all with Xbox 360 or before.
Yeah, the only console I have is a SNES Classic. So everything is on PC.
You actually scored one of those?
I did, yeah.
Oh, nice.
It came like a month late, but I did get one. Which was fun. I liked going back and playing like Donkey Kong Country, and Super Mario RPG is probably one of my favorites of all time. Like
cool.
I love that game. It was fun. I was glad that was on there.
So my transition to PC was kind of natural. We had the Atari, and then my dad brought home the first 486. And for me, that was like leaps and bounds over what I've ever had, right? And I think the original 1040 ran at pre-8088 speeds for its IBM emulation. But we had a 486, and all sorts of neat features started coming out that, like, the CD-ROM drive was a new thing that we added separately and had to install ourselves. Sound cards became to come of age, right? And so I kind of just naturally progressed. What brought you guys over from console? You mentioned a little bit in high school you kind of gravitated toward how the different thing, but what really brought you in?
Well, we had a Mac for a long time. And so somewhere along the line, I don't remember what year exactly, but my dad bought an IBM. I think maybe for work. He was kind of doing some work from home. So got that, and the first game we got was Descent Free Space, which is what we're playing now. And so that was awesome, like so much better than any of our Mac games, which were just bad, and like our console stuff was so much better than that. But Descent Free Space was like amazing compared to anything else we had. So that like kind of really grabbed me, and maybe just me wanting to fit in with you guys, playing Rainbow Six and Unreal Tournament and all that kind of stuff.
And I remember going over to your house back in junior high, and we'd play. There was the GoldenEye, right, for instance, and then there's the one Perfect Dark, which Perfect Dark was a cool game. Like the things it did was it kind of really groundbreaking for the time.
Oh yeah.
But the frame rate, if you remember,
it was really bad.
It was a PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Like it literally was a PowerPoint, and I was like, dude, have you tried PC gaming? And I think the game really that we grabbed to was Rainbow Six at the time.
I think so.
Which was kind of the first real tactical shooter. Even before every map, you had to go plan out your assault, which my plan for the assault was generally because you had to have something. So it was like move 3 feet, and that was my plan, right?
Sure.
But that was really one of those first games where really immersive, really realistic, and I love the fact that you playing on a PC and me playing on a PC, you couldn't screen jack me.
Oh yeah, having your own screen was such a novel idea that you didn't have on a console, but still being able to play with other people and having screened yourself, that was great.
But the flip side is a lot of times you didn't have your own screen, and instead you were looking over your friend's shoulder just watching them play a PC game because it either didn't have multiplayer mode or there was only one PC in the house and you couldn't manage to get them together for a LAN.
For sure.
Which is funny because back then PCs were so expensive. Yeah. You had one in the house usually. The whole concept of a LAN party, like we did LAN parties like every week in high school,
did them a lot,
right? Yeah. And people would always laugh.
Really
and people that you tell that about now is like you actually took your PC to someone's home and plugged it in and played. Like
with your giant CRT monitor.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean now they just
an ordeal.
They hop online and they're in. But for us, it was like, okay, if we want to play games, we're gonna go blow some circuit breakers, right?
Yeah.
See, my first LAN party was actually in college. I'd never been to one before just because I didn't have enough friends that had PCs, right? I had like one other guy. Now, we debatably had a LAN party, but can you call it a LAN party with 2 people and a crossover cable? I don't know. Probably not. Playing Half-Life at 320 by 240 in the middle of the screen because your machines couldn't do it.
Right.
Amazing.
So what took you from NES over to PC?
Yeah, I mean, so my dad had a PC for work. And so we would sometimes like go into his office. He was a freelance artist, and we'd go into his office and we'd use the PC there, and we'd learn a little bit about it. But really, what did it was that his PC broke, and the guy that came in to fix it robbed him blind. Not only took his money, but took a bunch of hardware. And so he was just like, I don't know what to do. And I was like, well, I bet I could fix it. And cocky little 8-year-old or however old I was.
Sure.
It was probably 8 or 9. And I was like, I bet I could fix it. And so he's like, well, it's dead if you can't, so go for it. And so I was able to find some parts and get things together and get it working. And he was so grateful that I got his work machine working again that he gave me like some little Windows play pack or something for like Windows 3.1 that had a few little silly games on it or something like Solitaire and stuff like that, right? And then again, when we moved to Idaho and I was about 11, his computer broke again, and he was frantic to try to meet some deadline, and I was able to fix it again, and he rewarded me with this little beauty here, Mist. It was about a year old at the time, but I had never played anything so immersive as that, right? Like, Nintendo games had always been arcades. They'd been fun. My sister and I competed head-to-head. Who can get the high score, who can do it fastest, who can, live the longest, those sorts of things. But, you run out of different ways to play Mario Brothers to entertain yourself when you've played through it 100 times, right? Whereas Myst, it was this huge, rich world that took me a month to explore as, like an 11-year-old kid, just digging, and constantly finding more and more worlds. Just my mind was blown that something could be that big. And that's when I realized that PC gaming just had more to offer than consoles, at least at the time.
And that being said, that month was mostly loading those high-quality bitmaps, right?
Yeah, my computer did not run it well. When I finally realized that you could do like the fast travel mode to skip over like each iterative step and jump to the important place, I was like, oh yay, and now it's going to take
Please don't.
1/8 the time to finish this game.
Please don't load that bitmap and you hear your CD-ROM and they're just the whole time, right?
Yeah.
Remember when that was a thing when you bought a CD-ROM drive, you bought how fast it was, like a 1X or a 2X or 4X?
Or 40X?
Yeah.
My grandma had a 40X, and I was just like, why does she have that? She doesn't need that. Maybe we could steal it and put it in our machine. Like, she wouldn't notice. And instead, we'd go over to like her house to burn CDs, and go over to her house to like go research Encyclopedia Britannica
that you had
faster,
discs for.
right? Yeah.
There was no internet research.
That's got to be the first time I've heard someone say, I went over to grandma's house for my technology needs.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Idaho, man. Yeah.
Awesome.
I guess the other thing was that my grandparents had some older machines, right? So my grandpa had that first like portable, quote unquote, portable machine that had like the giant pull-out handlebar.
Oh, yeah.
I think it was IBM 5150, and it was just orange on black monochrome monitor, little guy with a couple floppy drives, and he had Sopwith, Wheel of Fortune, Monopoly, a handful of other games. Oh, Alley Cat, and so I would get on there and I'd play that, and he was like, "Oh, I haven't used that thing in years. Does it still work?" And so I would get it up and running and play all these old games that he had. Probably pirated, not realizing it though.
Things were different back then, I suppose.
Yeah.
Because you used to go to computer stores and like, oh, you want a trial of this? And they'd actually just go make a copy of it. Like at the stores, yeah. So that was always kind of a weird gray area, which hopefully the statute of limitations is long over on.
Well, I figured as long as it was my grandpa pirating and not me.
There you go.
Yeah.
Right. And so as far as like kind of more digging into your genres, you say you like a lot of puzzlers, a lot of first person. What would you say would be kind of your favorite moments in game, or what kind of made you gravitate towards those?
Yeah, I mean, definitely just kind of the cinematic intro to Myst was a huge one, right? There was this in-depth story, beautiful imagery, beautiful 3D rendered things. That was a big one. Another one was actually Half-Life, and just the tram ride in on Half-Life, realizing that suddenly it wasn't a cutscene, it wasn't pre-rendered. This was exposition, and I could walk around the tram. Now, granted, you can't walk very far. You can only look at, a certain limited distance of, pre-rendered 3D imagery, but, not with a 3D card. It was just software rendered for me. But just the fact that you could now have a movie cinematic, but you could interact with it was just huge for me. It was crazy. Another huge one, and this is maybe a little bit more modern. This dates me. It's not that modern. Was Far Cry 3. And you have the mission where you have to like burn down all the crops,
yeah,
right?
yeah. I
And then
that.
the Skrillex music comes up, and you just like feel awesome. You're like, it's not the hardest part of the game, but it just felt amazing to be burning everything, doing this badass maneuvers while this music blares in the background. It was great.
That's a great moment. Yeah,
That was
forgot about that. Some moments. I love Mass Effect. That's my favorite one. I probably talk about that too much, but I want us to play it for the podcast. In the first game, there's a moment where you're talking with this thing, and it's just like a big twist in the game. It's like maybe 3/4 of the way into the game, and there's like a big twist, and I'm not going to say too much because I want you guys to play it and experience it.
Guarding your 10-year-old spoilers there.
Yeah, exactly.
Is it 10 years old? Maybe older.
It's probably older than that. I think it might have been.
Didn't the
original
latest
Xbox.
one just flop? Wasn't Andromeda kind of a flop?
Andromeda flopped really bad.
I own it, but I haven't played
For
it.
reasons that it should have flopped. It has some problems.
Okay.
Gotcha.
But the original trilogy is awesome. I love it. So that moment, and they do something with his voice that I love. They make it sound like so evil. It's like this weird combination of biological and machine, digital, like whatever post-processing process they're using on it. It sounds so good and evil and menacing. It's great.
Yeah, a lot of my favorite moments from gaming come from hardware advances, which makes I'm kind of a nerd in that way.
You nerd.
I know it, right? I loved watching kind of the gaming industry. Like we've not survived. We've had the joy of actually seeing it from its creation to where, like, I had an original Telstar Alpha Pong machine, right?
Ooh.
So we've gone from that.
Rich kid, you.
We've gone from there to where we are now. So we've actually got to see the whole industry take its baby steps of iteratively getting better and better and better, right?
It is crazy.
It's insane. In our lifetime, we got to see it. Now, granted, our folks would say, well, we never had TV. We only had radio, and now they have the internet. But specifically about gaming is, on the 46 that I mentioned earlier, we had just the mono speaker, the internal PC speaker, and gaming was beep, boop, that. One day, my dad brought home this box that said Creative Sound Blaster on it. I'm like, well, that sounds neat. We put it in, and he actually had these real speakers that he set on the desk. And I'm like, goodness, what is this? And we played this stupid demo, like just a random... It was almost just like a tech demo, that played like Beethoven's Symphony. And I was like, oh my goodness, the computer can make sound. And it just blew my mind. And then so I started playing games that it said, remember back in DOS days, you say, what kind of sound card did you have?
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, I have a Sound Blaster compatible, I have a Tandy, I have all the other ones. And actually hearing it, like the computer could talk. Like that blew my mind, right?
I think we've said the phrase "blow my mind" like 10 times already in this episode.
It's blown my mind how much we've said that.
Wow. So it was just amazing to me. So that for sure is a big one. Next one was the first time I got a 3D accelerator card. If you remember the 3DFX Voodoo cards. Voodoo was... 3DFX kind of pioneered that whole revolution. I never had the Voodoo 1. I had a Voodoo 2.
I think we had a Voodoo 2.
Yeah. And I slapped that into my machine, and I played Microsoft's classic Monster Truck Madness, if you remember that one. I don't think they've ever made another game with that property before, but it was like...
I don't think so.
You'd be like Bigfoot
or Midtown Madness.
Yeah.
That's good too. I don't think they kept doing that.
Yeah, and I put that card in, and I picked 3D Accelerated for the first time, and before, when Voodoo was popular, it would come up and there'd be a 3DFX logo that'd like spin, and it was all rendered, and I was like, oh my goodness, something good's gonna happen. And just going from software rendering, which was kind of pixely and not very detailed, to 640 by 480 at 16-bit color, but it was still amazing to me, and I loved it. And as far as games go, that's why I love single player gaming so much, is these memories they make. I'll never remember the lucky Rocket League goals I'll make. I'll never remember the good games there, just because they're so fleeting and they happen pretty often,
and they
right?
blend together. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
But like the moments of like Medal of Honor, Allied Assault, when you storm up Normandy Beach, getting to participate in something, you're not watching it in a movie, you're not far removed of it, you are there in the thick of it, right? Stuff like that is really what brings me to PC gaming and single player.
Yeah, I love those very immersive moments that just grab you, and they're great. No examples. That's the end of my sentence.
Yeah, I didn't make the switch to the 3D cards until my probably late 20s, when I bought a secondhand one off you. That was the first 3D card I'd ever had. Until then, it was pure software rendering.
Wow.
What was it? Do you remember?
I think it was not that long ago. I think it's the 710 that's in my kid's rig now.
Holy cow!
Yeah.
Well, you had that Dell XPS laptop that had a 3D card in it.
Did it?
Yeah, it did.
Okay.
It had some
I
form
didn't
of...
remember.
It was the first XPS, wasn't it?
It was, yeah, and it was a beast. Like, people complain now that their like laptop weighs like 4 pounds. This one weighed 14 pounds. And the battery power at its peak, brand new, lasted 3 hours. Ooh. And then after about a month, it lasted about an hour. But
and that's when you weren't gaming?
Yeah, when I wasn't gaming. That was me like taking notes in class, right? Because of course I had to spend my Pell Grant money on a giant laptop. I was a computer scientist, so I mean it was justified. But at the same time, played a lot of games on that.
I just imagine you going to class and just lifting that big old thing.
Well, it wasn't just me though. There was like a class of 15 people in the computer science department, and like 12 of us are like, go.
Same exact model.
And same like table, right? I'm surprised that these little tables didn't collapse under the collective weight of our laptops.
Right.
Awesome.
And so that was your kind. Would you say that was your first gaming rig? Was your XPS?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean up till then, the best rig that I'd had was a Pentium that I had dumpster dived out of a local college. So I found 8 computers just in the trash can behind BYU Idaho. And so I hopped into, well, at the time it was Rick's College. I hopped into the trash, I pulled them all out, and I was able to Frankenstein them together and get a single Pentium machine that worked out of all of the parts.
So most people dumpster dive for like a sandwich or stale donuts. You were going for Pentiums all the time.
Well, yeah, and before that I got an IBM, I think this one was a 5155, it was the green on black, and I dumpster dived that from a bank where I was a janitor when I was like 12 years old. Pulled that one out. Again, 2 rigs, one didn't work, and so my friend and I took it out behind, and we were going to just like dismantle it and throw hatchets at it and stuff. And carrying out the monitor, I managed to electrocute myself, not realizing that those capacitors can store quite a wallop.
You have the craziest life stories.
Yeah, I was just saying, it's like my dad...
always something new that we learn.
Yeah. Like my dad would like bring home a new hardware, a new game, and Cynic's in there like diving into a dumpster.
Hey man, one man's trash is definitely my treasure.
Right on. I don't know if you remember this. You guys built me a computer for my birthday one year.
Oh yeah, because your family just had that old, was it an old Celeron or something?
I can't remember what it was. That's what we had free space on.
Yeah.
But we used that for 3-4 years, and so by the time I was in high school, we were still using that. and trying to play more modern stuff and like bring it to LAN parties like never worked, like couldn't run half the stuff we were wanting to play. And so you guys built me a computer for my birthday one year. It's the best.
I remember that. We all just kind of
Awesome.
donated what we had left over, right?
Yeah.
How did your parents react when you're like, hey, I'm going to take the family computer to a LAN party?
They were usually fine with it, I think, because we really didn't use it that much.
Mm.
I think this is before the internet really caught on, that
Mhm.
you know, everyone just kind of used their computer more. So it was mostly, I don't know. I can't even think what they even used it for. I don't think my mom like ever used it. So
So it was just home collecting shortcuts on his desktop?
yes, exactly.
When I started getting my own rigs, what had happened is we had kind of the family computer, right? And as I got more and more interested into the hobby, and I started not doing more dangerous things, I'm like, oh, what does this modification do? What's this do? I started breaking the family computer more and more until my dad finally said, hey, it's probably time we need to work on you getting your own so you can ruin it all you want. You can leave ours alone, right? And so we started building one, and it was an AMD. I remember AMD K62. Because of cost, right?
Oh yeah.
They were always like a decent value proposition. They weren't as fast as the Pentiums or the Pentium 2s at the time, but it was good enough for me, right? And there was a local retailer out here in the West called CompUSA, which
I worked for
yes, you did.
a couple of years.
and they always did these like mail-in rebate offers where you'd go in and you buy a keyboard for $10, then you'd fill out a little form and they'd send you $10 back in the mail. My folks were always okay with buying those because my mom was really good at filling those out and getting them. I'm sure they're banking on everyone not like
For sure.
applying for that
Oh,
rebate
yeah.
or whatever. So my dad always called it the free 86, kind of a play on the 486 time. But I had a keyboard and a mouse and I think my monitor wasn't on free on rebate, but it was a heavily discount on rebate. And so I put that thing together, dremeled the case. So it was he brought it from his work. I'm noticing that a lot. Like a lot of our PC gaming came because our dad or our mom had to go to work,
Yeah.
or that was their work machine. Because back then, that's the only people that had PCs.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It wasn't a thing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so he brought home an old machine that I dismantled and put my parts in, and I didn't have a graphics card in it until I had that 3DFX Monster card. So it was just great to finally have my own, that when I took it to a LAN party or when I wanted to play games on it or modify it, I could ruin my own without getting yelled at.
Yeah. Yeah. It was nice finally having your own computer that was all yours.
Yeah. No, I mean, so that 5155 that I had, I used that a ton, even though it wasn't as good as my dad's work machine, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it was mine. I could do whatever I wanted on it. I could, keep my journal on it. I could play Beast in, all its glorious 2 colors.
I spent so much of my CompUSA paychecks on PC parts.
Really?
Games and yeah. Like, I don't know. I probably didn't make very much money in the end.
Did you at least get like an employee discount?
Oh, yeah.
sweet.
That's why I
All
was
right.
spending it
Oh,
there,
okay.
is because I had a nice discount.
So what would you say would be your favorite like PC purchase you've made? And it doesn't have to be a CompUSA, just any time in general. Like when you bought it, I'm like, okay, this
Okay.
was worth it.
I talk about my ultra-wide monitor a lot, but it's,
Oh.
I mean, I love that thing.
I'm
It's-
envious of it.
Like, I got it because it was like G-Sync and had a much better frame rate than my old one, and so I was thinking that was going to be the big improvement, and ultra-wide, like, blew everything else out of the water. Like,
Just the fact it's wider.
Yeah. Like, it was way more impressive than everything else. I can't really explain why. I guess just seeing more, I don't know. But I love that about it.
So Nick, yours?
I mean, it's got to be the XPS that I got in college, right? It was such a huge transition from even using just the workstations that they had there. They had a bunch of Linux machines that we could all use, but they were nothing special. They were probably Pentium 1s that had been repurposed from years before. And I would pull out my XPS, and suddenly people are like begging me, be like, "Hey, would you maybe compile my code for me?" Right? Like, because it would just go so much faster than anything else anybody had.
Well, I remember you came down to Utah to a visit back, I think right when you first got it, or pretty soon after, or
Yeah,
not too long
yeah,
after. And we went to a store here called Media Play, which is long gone because media's kind of dying. And there's this like bargain bin, and Cynic was there just like scooping these like video game bargains up in his arms. Because I guess from Idaho they don't have stuff like that there.
No, like I mean, I would go to the dollar store, and sometimes I could find like I found the Martian Chronicles by the Ray Bradbury one, right? And I got that at like the dollar store, but most of the places we didn't have like a bunch of games that were readily available for the PC.
And I remember we stayed up all night playing, what was it, Enter the Matrix or the It was a Matrix game.
It was
like,
either Enter the Matrix or it was Max Payne 2. I know those are 2 that we bought that day, and we were
Something
playing.
with bullet time.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah. Max Payne was a game ahead of its time.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was a good one.
So yeah, so your XPS would
Oh,
probably
yeah,
be that.
definitely.
For me, I'd have to say it'd probably be that first 3DFX card, that monster card I picked up. it was just so game changing for me, pun intended, to go from software running to 3D acceleration. Speaking of graphics cards, it's been kind of funny in the industry as we've watched it kind of progress, what we're willing to accept to pay for a graphics card, right?
Yeah.
Like when I built my, I think I built a Pentium 3, is about a 550 at the time, and I bought what was called the TNT2 Ultra card, which at that time was the bee's knees of card. You had the 3DFX guys that kind of pioneered it, and then this little NVIDIA but this little NVIDIA upshoot started coming on. TNT2 Ultra came out, and it had 32-bit color depth.
Amazing.
Which was amazing, like marvelous, right? But I remember I brought that to a LAN party, and everyone's like, whoa, he's got the TNT2 Ultra. And I'm like, oh yeah, it's awesome. And I think I paid $129 for it, for like the best card you could get.
Wow.
Now, obviously inflation's played a little bit part of this, but now it's not uncommon to drop 800 bones on a graphics card and just...
Yeah.
I'm far too cheap for that. I'm running at least 2 generations behind at all times.
But
yeah.
you could almost still get away with that.
I absolutely can, with my backlog of ancient games that I still need to play. I mean, sure, I have some modern games, and you got to downgrade them a little bit. Like when we play PUBG, I'm not at the top settings, but...
Yeah, but even still, things kind of got to a point and kind of didn't quite... There wasn't as much innovation as there was maybe in years past. There used to be a lot more leaps and bounds.
Oh, absolutely. I remember when we had our 46, my dad would bring home these AAA titles that he knew would be a struggle to run on our rig. And it was always a challenge. And that was kind of like his way of teaching me, hey, if you want to play this game, you have to do X, Y, Z to get it to run on the family computer, right? And so he'd get these games, and we're making boot discs at the time, where you're making the tough choice of, do I want a joystick or do I want a sound card? I don't have memory for both, right? But back then it was a new game had come out and your machine wouldn't run it. Yeah. It just, the software had outpaced hardware so far. And kind of in modern times, we've seen a little bit of a reversal of that, where, yeah, even with a video card 2 generations old, you're still running everything.
Yeah.
Maybe not at Ultra or whatever, but you're still running it.
And probably consoles have had a lot to do with that. That a lot of things are coming out both on Xbox, PlayStation, and PC.
Yeah.
And so they're kind of maybe held back. Whereas before it was very separate.
Right.
I mean, the last game I can think of that did that, where it pushed way beyond the boundaries, was Crysis, which we're going to play in our first episode here, which was in 2007. So, I mean, it was 2007 or 8?
7.
7. So, I mean, that's the last time I remember things being like, oh, yeah, this is not going to run on your machine. Whereas before, that was common.
Yeah, I think you're right. I don't think I've really seen that since then.
And fun fact, when I was installing Crysis to play for this first playthrough, I made the joke to myself, I'm like, can I run Crysis? Because I never could before.
Yeah. It'd be sad if you could not.
Yeah, it's so true.
Yeah, I don't think anybody in Idaho, in my neighborhood anyway, was going to be able to run Crysis.
I remember upgrading to Windows Vista so I could have DirectX 9, I think it was.
You upgraded to Vista.
I know, like
upgrade.
My reason for upgrading to Vista was so I could play Crysis at its best settings.
My Windows Vista machine became my kid's rig for the longest time, and it died less than a year ago.
Oh,
and
wow.
So my kids were playing games on that and stuff, and we just dismantled it after that, and I used that as like a teaching experience for my kids to like pull stuff apart. They wanted to desolder some stuff so we could like rip off some of the chips, and they had a blast with it.
Well, F for respects on that one.
Goodbye, Vista. May you rest far away
Somewhere.
from us.
Yeah. And it's funny because there's kind of on the internet there's a big divide between console gamers and PC gamers, which is really silly if you think about it, because we all share the same hobby, right?
Yeah.
A hobby that not 15 years ago wasn't looked too kindly upon.
Oh yeah.
Like when we were in junior high, how often were we the cool kids?
Never.
Ow, that brings back memories, but it's true.
But true.
Playing PC games, playing video games from every point did not make you cool or fun or interesting, but thanks to the explosion of consoles and the different platforms people can play on, gaming's become mainstream and acceptable, right?
Wii was a huge one, I think.
Yeah.
Really kind of streamlined that. And phones, tablets, that just everyone has. And
it's the number one console out there right now.
Lots of people have games that they're just carrying around with them every day, so... I think it's not as much of a stigma towards gamers, unless maybe, I don't know, maybe still addicts or something that, sit in your basement and play MMOs all day, every day. But.
And that really kind of, the MMO fans that stigma gravitates toward the MMOs, which really isn't the focus of this podcast. We're kind of more of a single player. We're going to play through an experience
Yeah.
and be done, right?
And I like an MMO. I mean, I'll enjoy an MMO or an RPG, but yeah, it's definitely more of a time suck, and so it's something I just can't indulge in very much.
Right.
I've never gotten into one. I like RPGs, but the single player ones, and any multiplayer MMO just has never appealed to me for whatever reason.
Which is funny because I bet we could probably sit down and identify like, kind of the main genres that have survived since the beginning. Like if you think of like MMOs or RPG elements, you had your original like text-based adventures, right? Hugo's House of Horrors. I'm trying to think of some more that were just Zork. Yeah, Zork, classic example.
I don't know any of those.
King's Quest.
I do know King's Quest. I like those.
Even, well, no. I think the initial Leisure Suit Larry was a little bit more text-based like that. But...
And that one's kind of gave way for the kind of the hybrid of the two, where you had, I'm thinking kind of like the Maniac Mansion, where you had kind of some text commands and some click, like kind of LucasArts, yeah. Those I can't even remember all of them. There was Sam and Max. There was Grim Fandango. Monkey Island, wasn't Curse of Monkey Island one of those two? So. Something like that.
Yeah.
And then that's naturally progressed into like Telltale games, right?
Mm-hmm.
Did you play through any of those?
Just the Borderlands.
Borderlands?
Yeah.
Which
I liked a lot.
Yeah, I did the Walking Dead one. My kids recently did the Minecraft one. I watched that while they played that.
Which, I mean, Telltale now, after respects again on that one.
Very sad.
But the thing is, it's not going to be gone. You're going to see kind of a rebirth of that.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Of that genre.
Yeah. Someone will pick that back up.
And then as far as like the MMO goes, do you remember playing Medivia back in the day?
Yeah. Was that the kind of what's the thing you had to lose to connect?
It was like a telnet. But they had like mud clients. It was a mud, if you remember, a multi-user dungeon. There was that one. There was Lord of the Red Dragon. Do you remember that one? Or Lord? Yeah. Legend of the Red Dragon. Like Lord was the acronym for it. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But those kind of paved the way towards, your World of Warcrafts, your EverQuest, your kind of that. It's fun to see these genres have survived. And Nintendo pioneered the kind of the match 3, match 4 type genre, which we were commenting on that the other day.
Yeah, Tetris, Dr. Mario, man, I should think of some more. Oh, Wario's Woods. What's the one where you shoot the eggs or the bubbles up?
Bubble Bobble or Bust a Move.
There, yeah, that one.
I think I played Bust a Move.
Yeah, it's fun to see these genres just kind of grow, and we've grown along with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And certain things that get hijacked for one reason or another that turn into other things, right? So I don't know if any of you played Kingdom of Loathing back in the day. Mm-mm. So Kingdom of Loathing was kind of one of these text games, right, where you're trying to choose different branching paths, but it was online, right? So single player online, but because they just didn't have the server capacity, they said, hey, you can only do 10 things each day. And then come back tomorrow and do more things, right? And that was just, purely a capacity thing. It got way too popular. They just had to limit people. But now you see all sorts of things like that, right? Where you have these games where you play with your friend on your phone. And it's like, oh, you have 10 coins for free, and then you're done. You got to wait till tomorrow. Or, you can pay us.
What's funny is now they've leveraged kind of what we were used to because of the technological limitations at the time. Now is like a financial thing.
That's interesting.
The other thing that I've noticed is how many different launchers are we getting now? Like
that's become a bit annoying,
hasn't it though?
Yeah.
And there's probably going to keep being more and more.
Like when Steam first came out, I was hesitant. I was like, I do not want to.
Well, and it was awful.
Okay,
it was not good.
The green one, Steam.
I just remember on a loser on dial-up like myself is like, I want to play. What was Half-Life 2 the first thing on Steam that required it?
Well. So I had a Game of the Year edition Half-Life 1 that required Steam.
Oh, really? So I had the non-Game of the Year edition. I had the original disc version of Half-Life 1 that was, funny enough, in Steam, you could actually type your code in and it'd activate it.
Oh, wow.
And you could still do that with a lot of things.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, but it's a one-time use, right? You can't just keep putting in the same code on a new computer
and
spin it up. It's tied to your account for forever now.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's what
but I remember,
whereas before, it was like, we'd go to a LAN party and people would share the same code and people would put in 12 of the same code and we'd all get the game working.
Again, statute of limitations. But it was funny because when Steam came out, I was so against it because I don't want to always be on the internet. I can't always be on the internet because I'm on dial-up.
Yeah.
Not to mention, what if this Steam thing goes away?
Yeah.
Do I lose my games?
Yeah, exactly.
That was a real concern for me.
It's still a concern, but they've grown so big that hopefully it won't ever happen.
Well, that's why I just have to, the games I really, truly love, I have to get both on Steam and GOG.
Just buy it twice.
Get the DRM free versions in there.
But it's just and Steam made it so like DRM wasn't so horrible. Like we grew up in the generation of okay, now grab the book and look on page 3, paragraph 2, word 7, and that's your copy protection. We
Yeah.
Steam made it so it's like okay, yeah, there's DRM, but it just kind of works, and we don't worry about it too much. That said, with every company doing their own launcher now, I'm kind of sick of having 12 launchers go when my machine boots.
Well, and the worst is Ubisoft Uplay, when you have to launch both Steam and Uplay to
Exactly
run a game.
what I
But
was
if you
gonna
just
say.
buy it on Uplay, you can launch Uplay by itself.
Sure, but like I bought the game on Steam, not realizing that I was going to have to set up a Uplay account,
Yeah.
right? Like, that's frustrating.
Yeah, that one's bad.
Was that the
So all the Assassin's Creeds are that
Creeds,
way.
yeah.
The Raymans, I think, are that way. The what
Crew
else?
was on there.
the Crew, yeah. The Crew, that's a good
Division.
The Crew, that was a fun reference to the Crew. You just had me thinking about with Assassin's Creed and the Crew taking real world places and
Yes.
making them a game environment. That's something we've seen kind of in the last 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
First one I can think of is Midtown Madness. We mentioned that a little bit earlier, where it had Chicago. Like you could actually drive in Chicago. No, it wasn't accurate Chicago. It was, here are 3 landmarks from Chicago that you might recognize. But you're starting to see that. Assassin's Creed had some of those elements. I don't remember which one though.
Yeah, the one in Rome. So
They
it
all
was
do.
one of the Ezio Auditore is one of the 2 series. I remember being like on Capitoline Hill and having to go to the Pantheon. I was like, oh, it's over there. Oh, I should check the map. And it was exactly where I remembered it being when I'd been in Italy. And I was like, wait, so if I went over here, would Piazza Navona be here? And sure enough, there was Piazza Navona. I was like,
so awesome.
wow, they really spent the time making sure that things were in the right place, right? And I'm sure there's a lot of filler buildings that are just garbage, right? Because things get torn down. But at least the iconic landmarks were all in the correct place associated with one another.
Yeah. I think the Division did that really well. Like New York is modeled pretty fairly accurately. Like people would go real world and be like, here's this random building and it's actually in game. There were Reddit threads of just, let's find all the buildings that are in the Division. And
Is there tourism for that, kind of like with Breaking Bad, where people go and visit the Pollos Hermanos? place?
there must be.
And I love seeing kind of these strides that gaming's making. Speaking of another one, you mentioned the Wii earlier, and which was a shock because I came to my parents' house one day and they had a Wii. The people that would never let me have a console had their own. I didn't even know about it, right? And motion controls. When the Wii came out, that was something kind of unheard of. Had there been any motion controls before that?
I don't think so.
Nothing that caught on for sure.
Yeah, I can't think of anything. I'm sure there was
Unless-
probably some sort of, well, I mean, I don't know. I guess debatably the mouse was motion controls in some ways, right? There's certain aspects of that. I mean, this was a natural progression, but yeah, I can't think of anything where you would move in 3-dimensional space before that point.
Yeah, probably not.
I just loved how like everyone and their dog bought a Wii, and suddenly gaming lost that stigma, right?
Yeah.
It was such a good thing. Motion controls. The Kinect came after the Wii and failed by and large, which I don't know why it did.
I think it was just the accuracy. It wasn't good enough, which was funny because like with the Wii, just as inaccurate, but it was just fun, right? Like nobody cared. It's a party game. Oh, I messed up. Whereas with the Xbox, you had hardcore gamers who wanted accuracy, and now they had this irritating thing that wasn't accurate enough to play their game.
Were there race problems, or is that just a fake rumor that
I don't know.
Yeah, I remember hearing the rumors, and I'm like, okay.
this camera does not detect certain?
Yeah, exactly.
It's very possible. People forget that sort of stuff. So I did some facial feature recognition in college, and I remember specifically seeking out people of various races just to make sure that I could train my software to find the facial features of different people. And then sure enough, when I turned it in, it was my senior project. When I was finished, my teacher was convinced that he was going to like catch me off guard because our whole class was white, right? And so everybody's working. He's like, oh, and just to test Rob's product, I brought in a friend. And he brings in an African-American man because he was just like, oh, this is going to break your thing and I'm going to shame you. And it worked flawlessly.
Beauty.
I was very proud.
You did it.
Yeah.
And I think kind of we're on the same paradigm with virtual reality. I've got a VR rig. I got an HTC Vive that we've played around with a little bit, not too much, but it's exactly that. It's a novelty. Like the precision's not there.
Yeah.
The immersion's not quite there because you still got quite a bit of screen door effect in your head to play.
It's just kind of heavy too. And
Yeah, and you got a giant thing on your head,
uncomfortable to wear.
and not to mention a giant tether sticking out your back, Matrix style, right?
And it's not well suited for casual gamers because not only now do you have special controls that you have to like memorize because you can't see them well anymore, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, you're asking people to want to just come in and casually look around this environment, but now they have to use a controller that maybe they've never used before. Like my wife wouldn't be able to use your VR controllers; that would be too hard for her.
Right. And that's what really ruins the immersion is you can look around and you see everything and everything's great, but then when you go to interact with something, I'm holding two magic wands that don't represent my hands, right? And the kind of the immersion and the thing that really makes it the best thing about it is destroyed with just that little control paradigm. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a new Kinect variant or some kind of motion capture variant for VR, just trying to help that along.
Yeah.
Not to mention the headsets need to get a whole lot lighter. The resolution needs to be much higher so you don't get screen door effect. But you can't go too much higher because even my 1080 Ti struggles to push my head-mounted display in a lot of scenarios.
I think it'll get there. It'll be a few years probably.
Sure.
I was sad that the projection clients didn't succeed, right? The immersive projection where you would have just like a little cardboard dome over yourself. You'd have to dedicate a piece of your house to it, which would be the biggest thing, right? So you'd have to have like a corner where you've got this projection dome, and then the projector, sits on either side of you to populate the dome. Kind of like those arcade games, the Star Wars arcade games that you could play that had the wraparound dome.
Yeah.
And for a while, I thought that was really going to be it because it was cheaper than the VR headsets, right? You could do it with things that could be heavy because they were mounted on the wall or down there, but it just didn't catch on.
So where do you see we've touched on VR slightly? Where do you see single player gaming specifically going in the future? Because right now we're kind of seeing a lot of multiplayer focused stuff.
Yeah,
and
I hope it continues. I think there's going to be people like Rockstar who are going to keep making single player things and be amazing at it, and people will see the value. When Red Dead Redemption 2 sells however many millions and billions of dollars worth of units. Mm-hmm. People will still pay for single player experiences.
But in that same token, their executives are going to notice that, they made this much money selling the game, and then after the fact, they made this much money with downloadable content, right? I'm sure that the same thing's going to happen to Red Dead 2 that happened to GTA 5, and that they're going to make more money selling sweaters and haircuts than they made with the game itself, right?
Yeah. That is, I don't know, just the times we live in. But again, we have giant backlogs, and we can always play all these old single-player games. I don't think we'll ever run out of things to play.
And the indie market, I guess, is always going to be single-player focused, right? Because it's harder to do multiplayer because now you have to have server infrastructure, which costs more, and you have to have more tech knowledge. Whereas if you just have a desktop client, you can always make an indie game.
That's true.
And I think we've learned, especially with these recent indies that we're seeing, is even if they don't have the budget or the art department for a AAA title, you can see some serious success. Thomas Was Alone. Did you play through that?
I liked that a lot.
I love Thomas Was Alone.
That was great.
The graphics were what?
Yeah.
Rectangles, squares.
Really basic colors and shapes. And
it had some great voice acting, so they did have someone do some really good voice acting.
Yeah, was it funny?
There's a lot of humor built into
it.
But it was just a simple geometric game that was a hoot. I loved it, right?
That was great.
And so I'm hoping that even and maybe our little podcast here can help say, there is a market for single player experiences because, like I said earlier, you're not going to remember that 5 kill streak combo or the giant rickety hut you built in whatever that stupid game is, Fortnite.
I was like, which one?
You're not going to remember those experiences, but you will remember storming up Normandy. You'll remember Elizabeth tearing holes in space-time to throw you a gun, which BioShock Infinite.
Great game.
Fantastic. Probably my favorite.
Still need to play it.
Shameless plug.
Did you make it?
No. It's one of those things where it's like, I'm almost like selling Amway, but not for video games. It's like, you really need to play BioShock Infinite.
It's like all the people that are like, have you heard about Firefly?
Yeah.
I might be one of those people.
Firefly's good. I hope there continues to be a market for it.
Yeah, it's all going to be about what people vote with their wallets, and right now it's unclear, and so I'm just not sure which way it's going to go. But at the same time, I think that we're seeing people overspending on network infrastructure, right? People are renting space in Azure and AWS or these different cloud solutions, and they're only getting their big money when the sale happens at the beginning of the game, and then they're just trying to beg people to buy more DLC to keep the game afloat, constantly eating into the profits that they've already banked.
Right.
And so if we see that shift, we might see people go, okay, well, instead of counting on that money and then losing the money later, let's get the money, pocket it, and run, right?
And really, I think there's a few solutions for that. I personally love buying a game and just having it. Even if it's just my backlog, I can always go back and play to it. Let's say I move to an island with no internet, whatever. I still want to be able to play games, right? And I'm seeing kind of an erosion of that mentality with the new streaming services we're seeing, where you're actually Parsec was one. There's quite a few. NVIDIA Grid, I think, was another one that they did, where you'd rent server time to stream the game into your home and play it on just a dumb console or your smart TV or like that. That could be viable. I mean, I know a lot of people, if they just said, hey, if you pay $20 a month, you can play whatever game you want, and that's just your game payment.
Or maybe not even whatever game, but just like a rotating catalog of, hey, there's 20 games this month, right? Of the 20 games, you're probably going to like one of them, right? I think that's very appealing to the casual gamer that doesn't want to have to worry about collections and compatibility, and, right? They just want to go, I just want this controller and that TV to always work.
Right.
Or buying a new gaming PC every few years.
Right.
You know, it sounds a lot more cost effective.
And maybe that's how they're going to strike that balance of continuing revenue versus one-time revenue of a single game purchase, right?
Yeah.
I, for one, hope we don't go that direction, because I work in the IT field. I know how finicky some of that kind of stuff. Latency is a huge issue. You'd have to have a data center in the major metro centers where you're playing. If you're out in the sticks, you're talking at least 100 milliseconds to the nearest data center.
Yeah. I mean, you could be cutting out all of rural America from the video gaming market, right? I mean, kids like me wouldn't have had access to that, and so we just wouldn't have played games, and we would have done something else. And so, I mean, that could really...
Wrecked Harleys.
That's right. Fall through roofs, you know, all the normal stuff. Push cars that don't work. Nothing.
So, just one final question. What do you want kind of our viewers and those who participate with us playing these games, what do you want them to take away from this? Like, what do you want them to know about you?
That's a good question. I don't know. What's your answer? Give me some ideas.
I'll go with you got to find a way to make time, right? Like, I have this massive backlog of games specifically because I haven't made time. You balance life, right? You've got work, you've got kids, you've got family, you've got whatever. But if you really love it, and if it's really something that you derive validation from, like I do, right? And not just from the sense of nostalgia, but just understanding the culture, knowing more things, talking about it with your friends because you've had the same experiences leading up to things, then you got to make time for it. And that's what we're doing here. We're changing the paradigm. We're changing our lives, and I'm making time to play these games with my friends so that we can talk about the same games because we've played the same games.
Yeah, and that's really what we're doing here. This is not multiplayer, but multi-user, single player, I guess would be the best way to say it.
Sure.
It's kind of old school, right? I mean, back in the day, most people in your neighborhood only had the same 20 games or less, right? Mm-hmm. And so you'd all played a subset of those games, and you could talk about them in the schoolyard, right?
Have you beat this yet?
Yeah.
Right.
Did you see this?
Did you learn about the secret in Zelda, right?
Right. Yeah, that was always great.
All right, so speaking of Zelda, I already know this one for you, but what are your gaming confessions that you have to admit to?
Yes, okay. Shame me in front of everyone.
Yeah, I will.
So I've
got my own.
I've played basically every Zelda game up to the Wii, right? I haven't played Breath of the Wild yet. But I've played every Zelda game up to the Wii and have beaten none of them. And again, it's just crazy. It's time, right? It's most RPGs are that way too. I never end up finishing them just because I don't have the time. And so I loved Link to the Past. I played it a bunch. Probably got about halfway done with it. I loved the first Zelda, played it a ton. I don't even know what percentage I'm done with that one. Right, the second one I didn't play so much. I do own it. I plan on playing it, but it's a little weird compared to the rest. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I just haven't made time to beat them, and so I'd love to mix one of those in with our game catalog.
That'd be a great idea.
I play Zelda.
I'm ashamed to admit this, but
yours is worse.
But being a PC gamer, I've never finished Half-Life 2.
That's so bad.
It's all right. They never finished Half-Life 3.
Somewhere Gabe just looked right into the video and was like, unsubscribe right now. But no, I had a friend who wanted me to help him get past the part where he's stuck on it. So I went over and helped him, like, oh, this is Half-Life 2. I got to be careful about spoilers. So I played one section, but I've never finished it. I think I got to the part where you have, like, the hoverboat.
Whoa. Like, I can get to that section in, like, 1 hour.
I played about an hour.
Okay.
That's about where I'm at.
That's insane.
All right, Frost.
Granted, most people wouldn't get there in an hour. I've just played that game a lot.
I hate the Fallout games. I feel like those are pretty beloved by everyone for some reason, and
for good reasons. Sorry.
So maybe I prefer sci-fi over fantasy like every day of the week. Like I will take sci-fi over. Post-apocalyptic stuff is hit or miss with me.
You like The Division, though.
I love post-apocalyptic.
Yeah, see, like, there are ones that work. Mm-hmm. And, like, I can't really put my finger on it what it is about Fallout, but it's very ugly and depressing to me. And I'm just like, there is no hope for the people in this game, and I don't want to be a part of it.
So we need to make Hello Kitty RPG?
It's not even that. Because like I love the Mad Max game, and that's hopeless and desert.
Did you play Rage?
Yeah, and I liked Rage well enough.
So you just hate Fallout.
I just hate Fallout.
So
I don't really. I can't. I've never been able to put my finger on
I know
what
what it is. He ordered the canvas bag.
No, I don't even know what that is. So no.
Controversy.
No.
Fallout 76 and flopping and etc.
No, I don't know that because I haven't paid attention to any of the Fallout games.
Which is funny how
I did play 3 and beat 3, and for some reason I actually
didn't
stuck
beat
with
3.
it.
I played 3, but I didn't beat 3.
Isn't that interesting how some of the gaming things we've done, we've stuck to little like genres or offshoots or series. Like you mentioned the Bioshocks, not Bioshock,
No,
Andromeda,
Mass Effect.
Mass Effects. Never played one,
Yeah.
but they've got a cult following, right?
Yeah, I want to play them. I own all of them, and just gotta make time.
Played 'em.
It's just funny because, and I've played the Fallouts, but never any of those.
Nah.
And Half-Life 2, that's still super embarrassing.
So sad.
And episode 1 and episode 2 of Half-Life 2.
Yeah.
And episode 3, right?
Sure, why not? Actually,
Maybe.
another shameless plug. Check out Project Borealis if you're interested in more Half-Life. It's basically fan-made, but it's beautiful.
Well, that was like Black Mesa. Remember that project where they kind of remade
Did
Half-Life
they
1?
finish that ever?
Black
It
Mesa
ended
got
right before you got to...
right before the Alien World.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which, let's be honest, that's where the game should have ended anyway.
I liked the Alien
No,
World. I know people crap on
no.
it, but I liked it. I enjoyed it.
You fighting the giant floating baby
Okay.
Huey.
That very
That's
last
the
one.
boss fight, though.
It's the
I just hated the
worst.
last one because I was too stupid to figure out how to kill him, and it took me like 4 hours to finally realize I could throw a backpack on his brain.
But you just spent like hours like escaping from Black Mesa and fighting aliens, fighting commandos, having your items taken from you, I think twice in that whole game. And now it's like, oh, by the way, now you're on an alien world. Have fun. I just hated that.
But the whole start was aliens. Anyway, we can fight about this another day.
We will fight about this another day. Anyway, with that, do we have any final thoughts for introduction? Our first game we'll be playing is Crisis.
Yes.
I'm excited for it.
Yeah.
Yes.
It'll
Yes.
finally
Well,
run on my PC. That's always a good thing.
Crisis did run.
Yeah. And it's
Um,
on sale on GOG. Well, I don't know if it is right this second. It was recently on sale.
It is
on
often.
GOG.
It probably often goes on sale, and it's probably cheap anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can. Any of the games, we'll try to announce beforehand what we're playing, and so you can play if you want to play through it before and then listen to our episode. That's kind of what we imagine the format of this taking is. We'll all come together to kind of experience and talk about the game that we just played, and then have listeners interact with us, either YouTube comments or Twitter comments. Just kind of say, whether you agree with us, completely disagree, or some dumb things you might have noticed that we just forgot to talk about, that kind of thing.
Right, and as a general rule, we're not going to be following each other's Twitch streams or their Twitter streams. We want when we come together to make our episodes a fresh conversation that we've never discussed it.
Yeah.
So interact individually with us. We'll have our Twitter handles in a second, so you can look at those. But
And we'll publish gameplay so that you guys can see it. We just each will abstain.
right,
Mm-hmm. Great.
so with that, get inside Crisis and join us. We'll have a good time.
Yeah. Take care.
Have fun.